hard, as you know, because you really do need some kind of an interim. So quite often the first minister who comes after a long pastorate isn't expected to stay more than 2 or 3 years, because there is so much invested love with the former pastor. You know, you've gone through that with your pastors. Well, even in our system, we have to have a way to work that because there's an interim. And once in a while, of course, like you, we did have one pastor that we were rather glad when he left. But it doesn't happen very often. Okay. Oh, I forgot to say that, see, I was going to read this just completely, but everybody else has been talking all over the place, so I figured, jeepers, maybe I better not start. If I had given you just what's on these pages, it would take 9 minutes. I typed it, but everybody else seemed to be going further, so I figured, well, I may as well too. Okay. When the Universalist was put up for auction, Reverend Sprague, on his own, bid on it. Then others attending noticed that he had bid on it, and knowing the circumstances, stopped bidding. Ira Sprague's heroic efforts saved the cause of Methodism in Auburn, though at the expense of his own health and probably his life. While digging the foundation for the new church, a skeleton was discovered. This area was believed to have been an old Indian burial ground. A small flint cutting knife was dug up on Laurel Hill near the outset of Little Androscoggin River, less than a mile from High Street. And you can see it right over there. It's in that case there, along with a plumb bog. It's also pictured in the book Almabach over there, which you can buy if you want to. It's the story of the indigenous people in Androscoggin County. Now let's go back to High Street. To pay for new pews, each pew was numbered, and families had to pay 25 cents every Sunday until all the pews were paid for. But it let them reserve a special pew for their own family, whether they were early or late to church. A 3-part stained glass windows was installed over the front door, honoring this Mother Foss whom I had mentioned, in whose home the first Methodist services in Auburn were held. 8 stained glass windows were installed in the sanctuary, honoring various people.
Now, is that no longer on High Street?
This is all High Street.
But is it gone? Is the building gone now, or is it still standing?
The building is gone.
Okay.
The building is gone, and it's just a parking lot now. Okay? During Reverend A.S. Ladd's first year as pastors, they said the finest parsonage in the conference was built, and that was supposedly it. In 1921, Harry Cochran, Monmouth's Renaissance man, painted the mural, A Psalm of David, for the sanctuary. He also stenciled borders around the sanctuary. And anytime you go to any church in this area, and you see nice stencils around all the windows and so forth, you can be pretty sure it was Harry Cochran who did it. A parish house was added to the rear of the church, and it looks to me like they took somebody else's house and just added it. I don't know, but doesn't that kind of look like it? I don't know. In 1923, Mrs. Walter Sargent established Girl Scout Troop 113. And in 1936, during Reverend Earl Grundy's pastorate, a $16,000 theater organ was installed. Now, Reverend Leslie Howland, not Reverend Grundy, is in this photo with Mrs. Ellen Ledbetter, who served as our organist for over 40 years, including even later in our Park Avenue church. During the Depression, agony suppers were held, to which each family shared what food it could afford. And about this time, the church had 2 orchestras. Sorry about that picture of Erland Dunlap. It's the only one we could find, and his family can't even find any pictures of it. If any of you have a good picture of Erland Dunlap, Kathy would very much like to see one. We just had to crop it from something else. But Erland Dunlap in 1947 said, "What we need is a new church. One without stairs, with church school accommodations, adequately equipped toilet facilities, and an urgently needing parking space." And so the parking space was particularly important when we decided on Park Avenue, because it was oodles of room. And even now we've got to enlarge it again and again, because it's just one of those things. But it has been a very great deal to us to have parking space, which we sure didn't have here. With Reverend H. Travers Smith as pastor, Mark Shedd as chairman of the building committee, and Clarence Cole as chairman of the executive committee, building a new church became a reality. 5 acres of land on Park Avenue were purchased in 1957, and there weren't many other buildings any farther along. That has now grown and grown until now, of course, Park Avenue is a major crossroads for us. In 1960, Robert E. Wilson of Hellman and Wilson in Falmouth, Massachusetts, designed it. And that's what it was supposed to look like. That isn't what it now looks like completely, but somewhat. In 1961, we celebrated our local church's centennial. From 61 to 63, our new church was built by the firm of Herbert E. Callahan. He was a member of our church. The first service was conducted on January 20th, 1963. Beginning in 1969, for 2.5 years, the newly formed St. Philip's Parish worshipped in our church while theirs was being built. And I think of 2 things that worked very well for them. They had taken people from various Catholic churches, I think particularly English-speaking people. Wasn't that really the big thing? And so that they formed a fellowship by being in this church. But the other thing was that we had a modernistic church, and they weren't used to having modernistic churches. And so it got them ready to be able to have a more modernistic church.
Yeah.
Under Pastor Rich Cullen's leadership, Auburn Methodism tries to follow John Wesley's emphasis. As you know, John Wesley in England was our forefather, and almost all of the Methodist churches in America were founded by circuit riders. And they would come maybe once a month and hold a circuit, probably at first in people's homes. And it was in Mother Foss's home in Auburn. But it was worship. He always said that we must have 4 things: worship, prayer, study, and service. In 1991, we hired our first director of Christian education, Sidney Croft. Our current DCE is Carrie Coffin, shown here leading the weekly Moments for the Children. Adults, as well as children, study to be better Christians. During Lent this year, former pastor